And we are at Parshas BeShellach, and I wanted to talk about something from the very beginning of the Parsha. There's obviously so much going on in the Parsha, but we're going to take something from the beginning, and a decision that really shapes Jewish history. You can't really play what-ifs with things in the Torah, because you don't know what would have happened had things gone the other way. You don't know which things God insisted on having happen, no matter what. But take a look at the first source here, pasuk from the very start of the parsha. Vayhi b'shalach Paro es ha'am, when Paro sent out the nation, v'lo nacham Elokim derech eretz Plishtim, God didn't guide them via the land of the Plishtim. Ki karov hu. Now I'm going to translate the word ki the way that traditionally commentators do, even though there are a lot of different ways that ki can be translated. But I'm translating it the sort of the usual way, which is for or because. So Hashem didn't take them via the land of the Plishtim because it was close. Ki amar Elokim pen yinachem ha'am birosam melchama v'shavu Mitzrayma. Because Hashem said they may regret it when they see battle, and they'll return to Mitzrayim. They'll return to Egypt. So, if you picture the map from Egypt to Israel, so you know that that it's possible to go straight north from Egypt, basically around the curve of the Mediterranean, and land in Israel. You'll go right into Gaza. So the pasuk here says that Hashem had the option of taking us straight up through Gaza and we'll be in Israel. And he said, you know what? I don't think that's a good idea. I think that because it's too close, we're going to go around. And what ends up happening is they go around the southern part of Israel into the Midbar, right into the Sinai Desert, and then eventually they'll end up marching north along the eastern boundary of Israel. First, they're going to try to go in through Edom. Then they can try to go in through Ammon and Moab. They won't be able to go through any of those lands. Finally, they'll end up fighting the Amori to be able to cross the Jordan and go into Israel. Are we clear on this so far? Okay. So, what does that mean when Hashem says, I'm not going to take you through the land of the Plishtim because it's close? What does that mean?
Yeah. Maybe it's too close that maybe they'll turn around or want to go back.
What would make them turn around to go back? Why?
Maybe it's going to be too hard. If it's too hard for them and there's hardships, then they'll just say, we're close, we're going to turn around. Or,
right.
I don't know.
In other words, you want to put some distance between us and Egypt. Right. This is, as I started to say before, a very consequential decision. Right. For starters, it means the Torah is not given at Sinai if you go through the land of the Plishtim. Right. I don't know where it is given. Is it given before they enter Israel at all? But you're not going through Har Sinai. Number one. Number two, you don't end up spending 40 years in the Midbar because there are no Meraglim. Right? The whole incident with the spies and all of that doesn't happen. There's no time to send spies. I mean, this trip, just to think about it in the context of things you've already seen in the Torah, this is the trip that Yaakov's sons made back and forth to go get food. Right? I saw one commentator who said it's maybe a 10-day journey to get from where Yaakov lived all the way down to, which you're talking basically, I think, Beit El, down to Mitzrayim. It's a very, very different story. And, I meant what I said when I said you can't really play what if, because if Hashem wanted them to get the Torah in the Midbar, they're getting the Torah in the Midbar. And if Hashem wanted them to get it at Har Sinai, it's going to happen at Har Sinai. I don't really see how, but, theoretically. And if Hashem wants them to end up spending 40 years in the Midbar, that's going to happen too, regardless of which way they go. But this decision of let's go around, let's go, not the easiest way, is difficult. And Alina suggests one idea for what Hashem had in mind, but this is what we need to talk through here. So what I want to show you are two schools of thought for what exactly Hashem was concerned about when he says, when they see war. What war was this? What was the concern here? And what I want to have emerge from looking at this is an unusually maternal image of God, and Hashem's relationship with the Jews. Right? So we're clear. We understand the pasuk. We understand that we have a question. The question is, what does it mean when Hashem says, "I don't want to take them the short route, lest they regret when they see war"? So, approach number one, is that this is about them seeing war when they enter into Israel. Now, I ran out of time for translating sources, so anything that I had already translated in other materials is translated on your sheet. Otherwise, it's just there as the Hebrew, which is why I gave you a table of the approaches that we're going to look at to help make things easier. There are four different ideas within the approach that Hashem was worried about the Jews' reaction to war when they enter Israel. The first approach is seen in Rashi, as well as Rashbam, and it's source number 3. And that is, we aren't ready to enter the land. It is too easy, as Alina said, for us to go back to Mitzrayim, and so Hashem says, I don't want to put them in that position. Right? Rashi says, Ki karovhu v'noach lashuv ba'osu aderech leMitzrayim. It will be too easy to go back to Egypt. And then Rashi says, "Umedrashay agada yesh harbe." There are a lot of midrashim on this. He says, I could spend all day long giving you midrashim about this. I'm not going to. That's Rashi's comment, and in fact, we're going to see a bunch of midrashim. But it's too easy to go back to Egypt if we panic at the sight of war. Ramban seems to think that what Rashi is talking about is wanting to go back to Egypt even without war. So Ramban says, it's specifically a concern for what would happen when we see our first battle. So if you take a look at source number 4, Ramban says, V'tam hamilchama, the meaning of war, when we say that God is concerned about them going back when they see war, Sheyia lahem lavor derech eretz plishtim, they're going to have to go through the land of the Plishtim, Uplishtim lo yitnum lavor b'shalom, V'yashuvu l'Mitzrayim, the Plishtim are not going to let them just walk through, and they'll go back to Egypt. Parenthetically, it's a side note, but I think it's an interesting side note. The way Ramban presents it is that the Jews would have been going through the land of the Plishtim, not actually taking the land of the Plishtim. Right? Ramban sounds like he thinks that this approach would have been, let's go through the land of the Plishtim to get to some other place. So this is important to understand. We talked about this a few years ago, I think, in Parshas Chayei Sarah, that the land of the Plishtim is only becomes Eretz Yisrael, so to speak, at a later date. The question of when exactly is this considered to be part of the land of Israel? Which part is Canaan versus the land of the Plishtim? So we did this discussion a while back, but Ramban here is begging for us to discuss this. When he says the Plishtim wouldn't have let them pass through in peace, he seems to think they wouldn't have just taken the land of the Plishtim. Do you follow? This is a very quiet day here. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So the statement that Ramban makes is to strengthen what I understood Rashi to be saying in the first place, which is the concern is when we see war with the Plishtim. And then Ramban goes on to say, if you go around, then you don't see war until you've gone all the way east and then all the way up the coast. He then points out that you do have a war before you enter the land anyway, right? The Jews fought a war against whom?
Amalek.
Right. The Jews end up fighting Amalek before they ever enter into the land. However, he says, yeah, but that's not the kind of war that would have driven us back. That's a different story. The Amalek came from far away in order to attack us out of hatred for us. It wasn't a war about Israel that would have made us turn around and go back. And he also points out, by the time we hit Amalek, we're also further away. We're already after Yam Suf. So he thinks Amalek is a non-issue. But this is all part of the idea that we were not yet ready. The other approach within this school of thought that says the concern is about war when we enter Israel is that the Plishtim, the Philistines, pose a particular problem. If it weren't the Plishtim, this wouldn't have been an issue. And this is an approach that's brought in the Dan Zakenim Balei Tosafot. Dan Zakenim is a collection of comments that came from, you talk about Balei Tosafot, so you're talking about 12th, 13th century. Take a look at source number 5, which is what Dan Zakenim points out. Psukim from Parshas Noach. After the Mabul, we get a list of which nations emerged from which descendants of Noach. And here we are told, Umitzrayim yalades ludim ves anamim ves lehavim ves naftuchim. Mitzrayim produced these nations, as well as Pasrusim and Kasluchim, asher yatzu misham plishtim ves kaftorim. Lo and behold, Egypt, the grand ancestor of Egypt, Mitzrayim, produced the Plishtim. Now, that's a fascinating question. First of all, the question of who the Plishtim are is a fascinating question in its own right. When they entered Israel, they were sea people. They seem to have come from the area to the northwest. That's a great question and a great discussion in its own right. But the idea here is that the Plishtim and the Mitzrim are related, and therefore Hashem says, I don't want the Jews to come out of Mitzrayim and go fight the Plishtim, because the Plishtim have a motivation to take revenge for their brethren. So let the Jews fight Amalek, let the Jews fight somebody else, but don't let them fight the Plishtim. The Plishtim are bad news. That's the
So
idea. Yeah.
It's close as in not distance, but they're close as in
Relative.
to the heart, close relative.
Bingo. Exactly. Karov. Who? They are related. Parenthetically, for anybody who's interested, this week's Toronto Torah, the Parsha article was by Rabbi Weintraub, and he didn't reference this, but he came up with a very interesting idea based on his time in Miluim last week. I told him I don't think his answer is pshat, but I think it's interesting anyway. He says he's patrolling down in the area by Aza, so he realized that you could say karov means similar. There were similarities between the Egypt the Jews had left and the Plishtim that they were going to see. He doesn't mention the blood relative issue. He thinks that there were other similarities between Mitzrayim and the Plishtim, which I find interesting. I'm not really on the same page with it, but it's interesting and it's worth reading. But that's one issue here, is the Plishtim pose a problem because they are relatives. And then there's a medrash in Shmos Rabbah. We learned this medrash as kids in school. I don't know if you did as well. The one about Shevet Ephraim leaving Egypt early. Did you learn that? No? Oh wow. I would have thought they would have taught it. Okay. And not only because we learned it, and therefore I think other people learned it, but because it's a very interesting medrash for its philosophical implications. Take a look at source number 6. This, because I've given a shiur in which I used it, I actually have the English translation for you. So that'll make this medrash easier, which is good, because it quotes some relatively esoteric psukim. Here's the story. The medrash here explains why Hashem doesn't want to take us through the land of the Plishtim. Lama. Ela sheta'u shivto shel Ephraim v'yatzu miMitzrayim ad shelo shulam haketz. V'nergu mehem lamed ribo. The tribe of Ephraim made a mistake, and they left Egypt before the Kates, the set time, was complete. And the result is that 30,000 of Ephraim were murdered. V'lama nergu, why were they killed? What happened? How did they make the mistake is really what the Medrash is asking. Shechashvu miyom shenidbar Avraham bein habisarim v'tau lamed shana, because they calculated the years that they're supposed to be in Egypt, the 400 years or the 430 years, they calculated it based on bris bein habisarim, based on the covenant that Hashem made with Avraham. Now, there's a little bit of math here, so Alina's going to be happy. There's a little bit of math in what he's doing here. I'll take a moment to explain. In the beginning of Parshas Lech-Lecha, we meet Avraham and Sarah and are told that that Avraham is 75 years old. Right? That's explicit in the Chumash, that Avraham is 75. Yitzchak, of course, is born when Avraham is 100. However, Ramban writes that Avraham was actually 70 at Bris Bein Habesarim. Even though Bris Bein Habesarim is recorded later in Chumash, Avraham is actually 70 at that point. And that's because there's this whole discussion about how old Avraham was when he entered Israel. And the problem, well, let me say it a little differently. Where was Avram, when Hashem called to him and said, Lech lecha me'artzecha and all that?
Was he in Haran?
Why would you assume he was in Haran?
Oh, right, he was Ur-Kasdim. I'm trying to think where he was before he left.
No, why assume Haran?
I thought they traveled. I thought that Terah, his father, was also on the way to Canaan, and they started traveling from where they were born, and they got to Haran, and then Haran died. Am I wrong?
So does everyone have a chumash around with Bereshis? Okay, you can go get it now. A chumash Bereshis would be helpful in this regard. Not a requirement, but helpful. Take a look at the end of Parshas Noach.
Yeah, they went from Ur-Kasdim, they went towards Canaan, and they came to Haran.
Right.
And that's when Terah died in Haran, and then Abraham.
No, I'm just going to let Donnie find it. We're at the end of Noah. Chana, do you have it there?
My daughter's learning it, so I'm asking her to help me answer.
Okay. Goldie, I know you have construction, so I'm not going to ask you.
Rosie knows it.
Okay. So, Alina had said, and she's correct, that before Lech Lecha, Abraham and his family have journeyed to Haran. So it sounds like Hashem says Lech Lecha when they are in Haran. The problem is that Hashem says to him to leave what in the beginning of Lech Lecha?
So your land,
your
which
father's
is
house.
Yes.
And the place where you were born. Avram was born in Ur-Kasdim. That's not Haran. So
that's why they dated earlier.
This is a problem in its own right. The upshot of it is, and the way that Ramban deals with it, is to say that Avram actually went to Israel twice. Avram came to Israel the first time with Lech Lecha and had some experiences there. Then he went back to Haran, and then he came back to Israel, which is when the pasuk that says he's 75 years old is recorded. And according to this I'm not making it up. Go take a look in the Ramban in Parshas Lech Lecha. According to this, Avraham was 70 at the time of Bris Bein Habesarim, even though he's 75 when the pasuk says that in Lech Lecha. It's a very odd thing. It takes some getting used to. But in any case, the point for our discussion and the reason why I bring it is because the Medrash is assuming that Ephraim counted the years that we are supposed to be in Mitzrayim, starting from Bris Bein Habasarim, when Abraham is 70, instead of counting from the birth of Yitzchak, Ger Yehieh Zaracha, your descendants will be strangers, which starts when Abraham is 100. So they're off by 30 years. You follow? That's where Ephraim was supposed to. Yeah.
Sorry, how would they have been able to leave earlier?
What do you mean?
Meaning, how would Ephraim be able to leave 30 years?
Good. So that's the right question. What does that mean, Ephraim was able to just leave? We didn't think Egypt allowed for that. And the answer seems to be that there were 30,000 of them, and they fought their way out. This Medrash gets quoted in anti-Zionist circles. They as an argument that you're not supposed to push the case. You're not supposed to try to force it. See, they were supposed to wait, because Hashem said, I am going to remember you, right? Pakod yifkod Elokim eschem. God is going to bring you out. And Ephraim chose not to wait. They insisted on doing it themselves, and they met a terrible fate. That's the message that some draw from this Medrash. You can push it, but it's not going to end well. So, take a look at the Medrash. Medrash says the following. They were killed because, as we just read, they calculated from the day when Avram was led between the pieces, Bris Bein Abisarim, and they erred by 30 years. And then the Medrash explains where they get this idea from. Because up until now, we haven't explained the source. We've just said, yeah, this is what happened, and we've explained the Medrash's mouth. But what's their basis? And their basis is 3 psukim. 1, a pasuk in Tehillim. Tehillim Perek Ayin Ches, chapter 78. In context, that chapter in Tehillim is describing an earlier generation which did not listen to God. And it says, in that context, B'nai Ephraim noshke romei keshet. The children of Ephraim were as archers handling the bow. So they're described as archers. The people of Ephraim were archers who did not listen to God. How did they not listen to God? Because they left, instead of waiting, they left on their own, and then it gives me another pasuk, this one in Hosea, Perek Tet, which in context is describing the Jews sinning in the wilderness. But that pasuk says, Ve'Ephraim lahotzi el harag banav. Ephraim brought his children forth to the murderer. And that means they were killed by the Plishtim. And then one more pasuk, which supports it, in Divrei Hayamim, which says, Ubnei Ephraim shuselach v'haragum anshe Gat, that the descendants of Ephraim were killed by the people of Gat. This is the strongest source for it, right? It's describing them killed by the people of Gat. Gat was one of the chief cities of the Plishtim. So this Medrash pieces together psukim about Ephraim being archers and not listening to God, and getting killed by Plishtim. And we have no other record of when Ephraim would have been killed by the Plishtim. So that's the idea. Yes, Goldie?
So basically God doesn't want to bring the Jews past the graves of their brothers? Is that what it is?
Very, very close. Look at the next line of the Medrash. V'hayu atzmosehem shtuchin baderech, chamorim chamorim. They're not even buried. There are no graves. The bones of Ephraim are just laid out on the path in piles. That's the concern. Shekvar haya lahem lamid shana sheyatzu ad shlo yatzu achehem mitzrayim. You have 30 years in between. At this point, they're bones. And Hashem says, Im yiru Yisrael atzmos b'nei Ephraim shtuchin baderech yachzur leMitzrayim. If they see the bones of Shevet Ephraim, they're going to turn around and go back. So this medrash is telling us that the concern is that the Jews are going to see not a new war, but an old war fought by the Plishtim and turn around. So one thing I think that's driving this medrash, aside from psukim about Ephraim, is that it's bothered by a fundamental problem, which is, why is God scared about the Jews having to fight a war against the Plishtim? If God can, just dynamite Egypt the way he just did, so he'll dynamite the Plishtim. Right? What do you mean that a nation is going to see war? Therefore what? To which his answer is, it's not about a new war. It's about them seeing what happened in the old war. That's this medrash's explanation. So, what we're seeing here is that that it's either Rashi, Rashbam, Ramban, that Hashem says the Jews aren't ready. They're going to see war with the Plishtim. Then they're going to just turn around and flee. They need to have space between them and Egypt before they see a battle. Or it's uniquely about the Plishtim, because the Plishtim themselves pose a problem. Either they're motivated as relatives of Egypt, or because they actually massacred Ephraim, and that's what the Jews are going to see. So your first school of thought overall is problems with war on the way into Israel. We could have avoided the Meraglim. We could have avoided that, but maybe something worse would have happened. If we gave up on the trip altogether and turned around and said, let's go back to Egypt, not just saying let's go, but actually trying to go, maybe that would have been even worse than the Meraglim. So Hashem says, let me prevent that from happening. We know that the Jews said, hey, let's turn around. Now they actually would have done it. You follow? Okay. So that's all one school of thought. Second school of thought. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? About that Ephraim thing?
Yeah.
Were there so many people in the tribe? Like, if 30,000 were killed, by the time they got into Israel and Yeshua divided them up, were they numerous again? Or
So they're not that large. I was actually thinking about that question. I remember that I did a census of Ephraim at one point when we were learning Shoftim or Yehoshua. When we were learning Yehoshua, I did it. That was where I did it.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot. 30,000 seems like quite a lot to kill off, and then explain how they were able to settle. And anyways.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's a legitimate question, and since I'm doing this on my computer, I'm going to actually take a fast look and see what the numbers were in the census. Hang on. So, the first time round, well, the census that you get in the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, so you're now in year 1, year 2, whatever, in Perek Aleph and Sefer Bamidbar, Ephraim is, at that point, 40,500. Which is not among the largest Shvatim, and it's actually among kind of the smaller ones. You compare them with those around them.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Zvulun is only 57,000. It's not 30,000 more. Yisachar is 54,000 and change. But on the other end, Yehuda is 74,000. So you'd have to really...
Right, so it makes sense. It could make sense.
Yeah. You'd have to do a table, which I did at one point, but I don't have it in front of me. Okay. So a second school of thought would be that this isn't about war when you're entering Israel. It's about problems once you have already arrived in the land. If you come in through the Plishtim, we're concerned about what's going to happen when you see war. Now, what does that mean? 3 different ideas. First idea, source number 8, Medrash and Shmos Rabbah. The Medrash there suggests the following. Rabbeinu Agadol Omer, Lefi shebikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu litein emasan shal Yisrael al ovdei kochavim. Hashem wanted to intimidate the idolaters living in Israel in terms of the Jews. Have them be afraid of the Jews. So Akavan Mem Shana Bamidbar, Hashem kept us in the Midbar for 40 years there's a goal besides waiting after the spies. Hashem gave us the pillar of cloud in the day, as well as the pillar of flame at night. All the enemies, they hear about this, and they're afraid. Quoting the pasuk, Tipol aleim emasav afachad, right, from this week's parsha. And so Hashem causes them to be afraid, and then brings us into the land. So Hashem says, I don't want them to have such a short journey. I need time to be able to impress everybody. And that way, we won't have trouble when the Jews get into Israel with wars, because everybody will be intimidated. Some of them were, right? Think of Yericho, right?
They still had problems, so...
Yeah, but maybe it would have been worse. Right? Like I said, it's always that's the what-if problem, but it's like the city of Yericho was scared. That's what Rachav tells them. So, the problems you find when the Jews get into Israel seem to be less about the opposition and more about the Jews not really being motivated to fight them. Right? When you think of, let's say, the Givonim / Chivi who surrender, while they try to cheat the Jews with a trick and all of that, like there was a degree of intimidation. This method worked. But that's one school of thought. The war is the war that God hopes we won't have to fight in Israel. A second approach is that it's not a war, a physical war. It's the war of Torah. Take a look at source number 9 from the Mechilta. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, Hashem says, if I take them straight from Egypt, right into Israel, they're going to take fields, they're going to take vineyards, and they're not going to learn Torah. I'm going to take them around the Midbar for 40 years. They'll eat the man. They'll drink from the well of Miriam, and Torah will be settled in their bodies. They need the opportunity to become people of Torah. You can't go from being slaves to entering Israel, and you'll have this very physical lifestyle, that which slaves had longed for so long. That's what you'll be like. So you need the opportunity to be in the Midbar. And once again, this puts a positive spin on the 40 years. That the 40 years are not all about punishment, but they actually have a positive purpose. Clear? One more idea here is a technical issue. And this is pointed out by the Chizkuni, but his source really is this Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah. Remember that Abraham made a deal with Avimelech. Right? Im tishkor li uleni ulenechdi. No deceit between you, me, and my grandson. So the problem, says the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah in source number 10, is that his grandson is still alive. So therefore, you can't fight with them. We wouldn't be allowed to fight with them. So according to this school of thought, we could have avoided the bad things of the 40, yes, but we would have collapsed once we were in Israel. It's not about collapsing on the way. It's about collapsing when we're in the land, in the sense of either having to face wars that will be harder, or becoming a nation that is just focused on financial well-being and the fields and the vineyards and all that, or trying to fight with Avimelech, with the Plishtim, and not being able to because the covenant has not expired yet. Follow? So we have all of these different explanations. And I didn't put review questions on the sheet because I gave you the tables, and I'm hoping the tables that you have in source number 2 and source number 7 will be helpful. But here's where I wanted to go with this. Either way, whether you take the approach that it's about war on the way into Israel, or it's about war when you're in Israel, this presents an unusually, maternal image of Hashem. if you don't like a stereotype, I'll just call it a protective image of Hashem. Right? If you don't like the idea that the mother is the more maternal, is the more protective, and all that, fine. Don't say maternal, just say protective. Then whatever you like. But think about it. If we are worried, and this goes back towards what I had said earlier, if we are worried about war when you're entering Israel, just obliterate them with more makos. Right? Call in airstrikes against the Plishtim, and you're done. If you're worried about war when we are already in the land as well, it doesn't make any sense. Just obliterate them. That's it. There's nothing to worry about. If you take the view that it's about the not learning Torah, the Mechilta, then it's a separate conversation. But the answers that speak to intimidation of the Jews, Hashem could have taken care of that. Why are these valid concerns? You follow my question? Why are we concerned? The Jews, oh no, they're going to see war, they're going to turn around. Hashem will bring hail and fire down on the Plishtim, and the Jews will walk through. What would you say? You've now spent, half an hour on these different approaches. Why are any of them necessary?
Maybe one way could be Hashem did all that already when they left Mitzrayim with the Malchus. So this is a different way Hashem showing. I love this maternal. It's nice, but maybe that could be something.
Right. See, I gave my answer too soon. I should have held back on my answer. But yes, that's where I'm going. Okay. But to speak to your point about, Hashem sort of says, been there and done that for the Makos. We saw last week Rosh Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in source number 11 when he talks about Paro's hardened heart. And I brought it for you here.
But not to minimize, Rabbi Torczyner, about been there, done that, but even more so to show even more love. Here's even another way. I'm always going to protect you and be with you. Especially even how they, B'nai Israel with the man. Like there's sometimes, like most people aren't good with change. Like who knows? Just another way.
Right. So I'm going to hold that thought. I just want to show you, Hirsch made the comment that Hashem does all the miracles he does when he takes them out of Egypt once. He says, Mikanu lahaba ein od tzarech b'nisim. After that, there's no more need for those miracles. K'anisim kvar hayu ukvar na'asu. Literally, been there, done that. He says, we already were there. We already did that. B'makomahu, back then. So Hashem doesn't want to do it again. You could also say that, it's not about fighting at all. If you take the Medrash about Ephraim being massacred, so it's not about us seeing a war. It's about seeing the results of a past war. Or if you take the view of the Mechilta that it's about the war of Torah, then also this isn't so relevant. But I would suggest that yes, what I had floated and what Donnie expanded on may be what's going on here. Hashem is capable of bringing us in with thunder and lightning. But maybe Hashem realizes that being in a war is traumatic even if you win. It isn't necessarily good for you. I brought you in source number 12, also from the beginning of our parsha, and we already referenced this earlier. Hashem walked before them by day with a pillar of cloud, lan chosam haderech, to guide them along the path. V'layla be'amud eish laha'ir lahem, and at night, with a pillar of fire to illuminate for them, laleches yomam v'layla, to walk day and night. So we have two ways. You have the pillar of fire, and you have the pillar of cloud. So fire usually gets the press, so to speak, right? Hashem descends in fire on Har Sinai, next week's parsha. We're told, don't follow the idols. Hashem is an Eish Ochla. Hashem is a consuming fire. We're told that Hashem is going to be a consuming fire against your enemies in Parshas, I think it's Ekev, Dvarim Perek Tes. What's the role of the cloud? Why can't you have fire all the time? Right? Let it be fire by day also. You can still see it. But I think you have two paths in our relationship with Hashem. We have two ways in which we relate to Hashem. You have the path of Ahava, and you have the path of Yira, right? The path of love and the path of awe. right? There's a Gemara in Kiddushin, and this feeds into my idea of the maternal image versus the paternal image. The Gemara in Kiddushin talks about the fact that when we're told to honor our parents, we're told kabed es avicha v'es imecha. Honor your father and mother. Whereas when we talk about awe for our parents, it says ish imo v'aviv tirau. You should have awe for your mother and your father. So the mother is put first when you're talking about awe. The father is put first when you talk about honor. And the Gemara explains that children tend to feel a closer attachment to their mother, more likely to honor her, but less awe. Whereas with the father, they're more likely to have that awe, but less likely to have the honor. And stereotypes are what they are. Deal with it. But that's the Gemara's statement. And therefore what the Gemara says is that the Torah is trying to say you need to have honor for both, and you need to have awe for both. But coming back to this, these are two paths in our relationship with Hashem, and two paths in terms of how Hashem relates to us. You have one point where Hashem says to Moshe, Ko somar leves Yaakov, v'saged livnei Yisrael. So shall you tell the house of Yaakov, so shall you tell to the children of Israel. And the Medrash says, lahagid and lemur are two different modes of teaching. Some you teach more gently, some you teach more harshly, more strongly. Avinu versus Malkeinu, right? The parent who focuses on the welfare of the children very personally, and the king who looks at the greater impact on the nation. And here you have the fire and the cloud. And the fire is harsh, and the cloud is gentle. And I found this source. Take a look at source number 13. Rav Shlomo HaKohen of Radomsk in his Tiferet Shlomo, in a piece for the 7th day of Pesach, which of course is when we cross through the Yam Suf. We read the pasuk in source number 12 that described the pillar of cloud and the pillar of flame. And the word used for the cloud was lanchosam haderech, which literally is to lead them on the road. Just like v'lo nacham elokim in the opening pasuk of the parsha. However, he says lanchosam hu lashon nachas v'ratzon. Lanchosam is an expression of nachas, which I translated here as satisfaction. It's one of those words that doesn't have a good English translation. But satisfaction and acceptance. Ki Hashem yisbarach hora lahem liyisrael haderech asher yelchu va lifnei Hashem. Hashem showed the Jews the path that they were to traverse before Hashem. Lios nachas ruach lifnei Hashem yisbarach meha abdus shelahem. That they should produce nachas for Hashem from their service. So lanchosam is for them to give nachas to God. V'zeu bechinas amud ha'anan, like the cloud. Shehu bechinas ha'chesed shel Aharon, which is like the chesed of Aharon. And the reason why he makes the association with Aharon is because we are taught that the cloud comes in the merit of Aharon. Right? The well is Miriam's merit, the man is Moshe's merit, and the cloud is Aharon's merit, which is why the cloud disappears and the Canaanim are able to attack after Aharon dies. So he says the cloud has the chesed we associate with Aharon. Rodev shalom ben Yisrael la'aviyim shabashamayim, pursuing peace between Israel and their father in heaven. Lehyosam osim hamitzvos be'ava v'kavanas halev, for them to do mitzvos with love and with full intent. So the cloud is much more gentle. It's sort of this bilateral nachas. It's nachas for Hashem from us, and nachas for us from Hashem, leading us easily, leading us gently, leading us with chesed. And think about what the cloud is credited with. Right? We say that the cloud swallows up the arrows that are shot from outside. That the cloud preserves the clothing of the Jews as they travel through the midbar. Their clothing doesn't wear out because the cloud is preserving it. Even outside of this story, we talk about there being a cloud over Sarah's tent, and Sarah's also seen as a protective figure. So that I feel like what we're seeing here with Lo Nacham Elokim Derech Eretz Plishtim, Hashem doesn't lead them through the path of the Plishtim because of what's going to happen if they see war and they panic. Hashem could be the fire and burn everything in their path. But instead, he guides them as the cloud. He says, you know what, I'll take them a different route. better for them that way. And it's a different model. It's not the view of God sort of punishing and zapping. It's the view of God as the one who protects and saves people. It's a different way to look at it. And I think the Torah is presenting us with both models because both are present within Hashem's conduct towards us. How Hashem's midah, how Hashem's attribute leads to sometimes being the cloud and sometimes being the fire is a good question. But I think here we're seeing the cloud. You follow? So, yeah, Chana, you going to say?
Yeah, beautiful.
Oh, thank you. So if you want, I can give you a 5-minute Dvar Torah for Tu B'Shvat. Yep. Okay, we've got that.